This is my Porsche 992, and this little thing is still one of the bits I hate the most. I've been trying to replace Porsche's razor selector with a proper mechanical style shifter without losing the original PDK functionality, and I've now got much closer than I was in the last video.
But I'm going to be honest with you, I've gone through countless prototypes now, redesigning so many different parts of this thing, and I don't think it's impossible, and I never thought it was going to be easy, but it is definitely taking me longer than I really wanted it to. I desperately wanted to show you the finished working article, and we're ready to go. Now, that's not quite the case. I think we're getting closer now, but there still remains some issues to resolve, and this is all really part of trying to create a prototype and to build something that I don't think has been built before by anybody else, and if it has, I'd love to know. So I'm going to show you where I've got to, the problems I've got, and what I need to do to take this to the next step. The principle is this, that this chassis frame here will effectively sit over the top of the existing PDK shifter. So this is in current mode and would work as if it was a razor. So push forward, pull back. Push forward, change back. That is putting you in reverse and into drive. Now, when you then want to move into manual mode, and it will actually be pushed left to do that, push it over there. Now you see this is now released. This is now released, so the PDK shifter, the razor shifter, is released off of this tab. And this is where, with this frame mounted on top, we will have the buttons that are effectively running off the paddle shifter. Okay, so with the principle explained, let me talk you through the build-up, how this whole thing comes together, and how the PDK razor unit integrates with it. So in this particular prototype, and I'm going to show you my first cock-up here, the model uses a suspension setup on each side to create a sprung return, but I run into a bit of a cul-de-sac when it comes to the packaging, as you can see here. Now, if you look at the model, the suspension is on either side. It's a spring-loaded mechanism which is meant to return the chassis, the red part, back to the center. But no, that didn't work. So while I redesign and reprint that bit, I'll get on with the testing of the upper chassis shifter fitting. Now, as you can see there, I just cut those metal rods down to size, and that gets the top gear part mounted. And I appreciate that this is still a prototype, so it looks a little Mickey Mouse, but I'm using a suspension damper in here to get that sprung return feeling at the top. And it works pretty well, and I like it as well, because at this stage it gives you some tunability. So that's the shifter now rocking back and forth. Now at this point I wanted to take some inspiration, because the BMW shifter has exactly the feel that I'm looking for, or certainly close to it. So I picked up this cheap version out there off of eBay and took it to pieces. I'm not going to show much mechanical sympathy here, but and this is the Hall sensor, so that's what picks up on the movement of the gear shifter. I'm not going to be employing that, unfortunately, because that means a complete redesign of the razor. But as you pull it apart, there's a motor mechanism here, which I'm going to talk you through a sec. And then here inside is the shifter, which actually is quite simplistic in its setup. So this motor here, this winds in and out this catch. And it's this release here basically stops this shifter moving. So when that is locked into place, I'm assuming the foot brake is down and you push the parking button, that is going to wind out and release this bar here, and then that allows the shifter to move forwards, backwards, which it actually does anyway before you do that, but also into manual mode, which is over to the left, and that allows for shifting in that space too. Now, if we look closer at the mechanism, it's again, as I say, quite simplistic. This white piece slides back and forth in between the manual and normal drive modes. And then this piston here glides in and out of that channel, and that's what gives the resistance. So I'm going to try and model something here that's the same. So I built this piece here. This clips into the top of the chassis. And as you can see here, before I mount the underlying element, that is going to allow it to click and hold into place as it moves to left to right into manual and normal razor mode. So for my initial follower implementation, I've used a spring loading at the bottom on the base. Don't know if I'm going to use that going forward, but I'm going to try it. Now the actual shifter switch, epoxy glued in underneath, so that holds in there. And then I've got these mounting guides that go in each side, which then mounts it on top of the PDK shifter chassis and then screws into the base as the current one does. That is the implementation at the moment, but let's take it on a few more steps. So to hold that base on top, these mountings clip on either side and then they're screwed in underneath, and they hold in the top part of the chassis and the bottom part of the chassis and hold that into the existing PDK mechanism. Again, yep, test fit, that all fits in nicely. Now underneath, that then screws in. I realised here that this printed version didn't have the mounting inside. It actually should be stepped inside a bit so those screws aren't protruding. Okay, even with that in, this is where I find out that even in prototype form, the sprung followers aren't going to work in this current format. They're too long and equally have too much friction. I expected some of this. It is the first install, but as you can see here, there's far too much movement, and really that is because they're too long and probably could be wider. Anyway, let's keep pressing on. These switches, they mount either side, and these are the switches that are going to run from the paddle shifter or copy the paddle shifter inputs, one on each side. Now with those held in, you can see back and forth, that switches them. There's a space at the bottom, that's where the current PCB that gets mounted in there. Little bearing on top, that's for the gear mount. And here we can see this is what it will look like with the shifter on top. And another quick peek underneath to see how this all fits together. Again, as I say, possibly some fine tuning in here. I think it can be packaged a bit tighter, but overall, I'm quite pleased with the progress, albeit I'd love to have got it finished by now.
Now, as I expected, these kind of things all really in the end come down to refinement and that kind of mechanical feel. Now, this is a 3D printed part at the moment, and I recognise that some of these pieces are going to need to be replaced by metal components to provide that strength and feeling. I didn't want to do that until I'd really got to the point of proving that architecturally this could actually work. So if I'm being hypercritical of what I've done so far, it doesn't quite feel as mechanically tight as I'd like it to. And some of that is just going to come through further refinement of the model, and also just adding in some components that are going to prove how closely knit all of this actually is. But mechanically, I think the prototype is proving what is viable. Now let's get on to the next challenge, and that is the electrical piece of this. And clearly, without the electrical piece of this, then it's not really much of a shifter. Now, I'm going to show you some of the testing I've been doing, and I recognised that initially when I started doing this, I was doing it wrong. I was doing it with a multimeter. Now I've decided to use a different tool under some advice, and that seems to make logical sense. However, I've run out of time on trying to get this done in amongst everything else, work, life, and if anybody's got any pointers on where I'm going wrong here, they would be massively and gratefully received. And if you want to keep getting updated as I progress this, because this is definitely not the end of the road, please subscribe and give this a like, because it keeps me motivated. And I've got to be honest, you do need motivation when you're trying to do this kind of stuff. So that's the end of the video. And what are the next steps? Well, as I mentioned earlier, mechanical refinement is one of the things I need to do. There may be some optimizations I need to do on packaging, and clearly I've got to solve the electrical readout that I want to pull from the paddles. If that's not the right place to do it, I'm all ears for any other opinions. So, as always, I'm Mark, this is Dad in the Shed. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate your comments. Keep it sensible, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching.